Philip Breedenbucher opens the webinar.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's first webinar in the AFCARS Final Rules series, brought to you on behalf of the Health and Human Services Administration for the Children and Families Children's Bureau. Today's webinar, entitled An Overview of the Adoptions and Foster Care Analysis Reporting System 2.0, will focus on the overview of the AFCARS 2020 Final Rule, published in May 2020. Today's webinar will include a brief description of the changes from the current AFCARS reporting to the new reporting based on that final rule. It will also introduce new compliance and penalty section on that final rule. And this webinar will be co-presented with the Division of Performance Measurement and Improvement and the Division of Policy. I'd like now to introduce our speakers to you. First, we have Jennifer Haight, who is the Director of the Division of Performance Measurement and Improvement. We have Rebecca Ordor, who's the AFCARS Administrator in the Division of Performance Measurement and Improvement. We also have with us, if we could advance the slide, we also have with us today, Jana Bertucci. She's a Program Specialist in the Division of Policy. And we also have Teresa Young, a Program Analyst in the Division of State Systems. And I will be your webinar facilitator today, and my name is Philip Breitenbuscher. Next slide. So today we'd like to encourage some participation from you all, and there will be periodic polling questions that we'd like for you to respond to. You're also welcome to use the chat function throughout the webinar today. You're also welcome to submit questions using the question and answer feature down at the bottom of your screen. And then you also have a raised hand feature that you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we can open up your phone line at that point for you to be able to ask a question verbally if you'd like to do that. You're also encouraged and welcome to submit additional questions at afcars@acf.hhs.gov. All right, next question, or next slide, please.
So thanks, Phil. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar here. This is Rebecca Oder, and I am the AFCARS Administrator at the Children's Bureau. And for those of you who I haven't met yet, which is most of you because I'm new to the position, I look forward to working more closely with you all in this position. I've only been in this position since the new year. So I'm going to start out by just talking about this webinar itself and what it's meant to be and what it's not meant to be. This is the webinar, it's the first in a series. And while we expect it to address some of your questions, we know that more questions are going to surface. You guys are going to have more questions. This is not going to answer everything. We're working to fully operationalize what these changes are from AFCARS 2.1 and developing guidance for the states and tribes. But we also want you all to know that, I mean, we understand this is challenging. This is brand new. There's lots of changes from the old AFCARS to the new AFCARS. And we know that there are concerns. We want you to let us know what your concerns are, what your questions are. There's things like changing definitions. There's difficulty in collection. So we're becoming aware of that, and you all let us know, because what we're really trying to do is be clear and deliberate in the technical assistance that we're offering to you all and what resources are most helpful. And we need to do research on our end too, just to make sure we're fully operationalizing all the definitions and such. So this webinar won't be everything for everybody, but please submit questions as they come up to the AFCARS mailbox, and that is at the afcars@acf.hhs.gov. Our next webinar is tentatively scheduled for August 31st, so you can mark your calendar now. We will house these webinars. We're recording them now, and they'll be on the CV website as soon as we get that page built. And we will email you all a direct link. So when that recording is posted, you all who have registered for this will receive that direct link. And an associated handout hopefully will come after in a follow-up email from this. So here is the presentation, what we're expecting to cover today. So I'm looking at the background to AFCARS. We're going to talk about the reporting population, compliance and penalties, the out-of-home data file, and adoption and guardianship assistance data file. We're going to talk about CWIS.
CCWIS, or CWIS, is the acronym for Comprehensive Child Welfare Information Systems.
And your resources and next steps. So I'm going to turn this over to Jana so she can walk us through. She is with the Division of Policy. And actually I'll do a poll first. I want to know from you all, there's 336 attendees. So we're going to start this poll. How familiar are you with the new AFCARS 2020 final rule? We want to know, are you all very, somewhat, not very, or you're just not sure if you know about the rule or you don't know about the rule? So if you all can let us know where you stand with this AFCARS 2020 rule, it'll help as I'm designing my comments and such. So the poll's open now. You should be able to see it on your screen. There should be a little click for very, one for somewhat, one for not very, and one for I'm not sure. All right. We have folks working in the background on the poll. So, Resh, how are we doing? Should we, do we have folks in the poll? Should we close it out?
Yep, let's give one more second just in case.
Okay.
And
Great.
I will be closing it now.
So we have some experts in here, but it looks like most of us are falling in that somewhat and not very familiar with this AFCARS rule. Completely understandable. It was just released May 12th. We get that, although you had the little preview in the NPRM, which Jana will talk about more soon. And those of you that are not sure, I get it. Again, this is new to me in this position also. So I've closed out that poll, and I'm going to turn it over to Jana in our Division of Policy, I think. So Jana?
Thank you. I am with the Division of Policy, and I will review briefly the background on AFCARS and a short history of the regulation development. Next slide, please. On this slide and the next slide is just a short timeline, an overview of events, as it were. The AFCARS regulations were first published in 1993 in response to the requirements of Section 479 of the Social Security Act, which mandates adoption and foster care data collection. In December of 2016, CB, the Children's Bureau, issued a final rule revising AFCARS. This rule increased the number of data points that must be reported from the AFCARS 1.0, as we call it, or the 1993 AFCARS. The President issued Executive Order 13777 in 2017, and under this executive order, the HHS Regulatory Reform Task Force was created, and they identified the 2016 final rule as one in which the reporting burden may impose costs that exceed benefits. In response to the task force in the executive order, CB issued the 2018 Advance Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, ANPRM for short, that solicited comments on the 2016 final rule's data elements and the cost and burden associated with implementing the 2016 final rule. And as we analyzed the comments that we received in response to the ANPRM, CB also worked with HHS subject matter experts to identify elements that were not needed to meet specific Title 4B or 4E statutory requirements and program monitoring, congressional reporting, or budgeting. Next slide, please. So in response to the 2018 comments, we issued the 2019 Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, which proposed a streamlined set of data points for the out-of-home care data file and made conforming changes in just a few other sections. CB analyzed the comments that we received in response to the proposed rule, and overall, the comments did not provide new information from that submitted in 2018. So substantive changes to the proposal were not made for the final rule. And then the final rule was published last month, as Rebecca said. So listed on this slide in the third bullet are the other sections of the AFCARS regulation, and they are the areas where we did not make substantive changes to the final rule.
Sections not impacted include scope, reporting populations, data reporting requirements, adoption and guardianship assistance file, compliance, and penalties.
And the online edition of the Code of Federal Regulations will be updated sometime after July 13th, and that will house, that will be where you can see all the AFCARS requirements in full. And now I will turn the presentation back over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. Let me share the timeline, the visual timeline here of what we are showing in AFCARS. And I'm going to, let's see, get my little, so I can point to things. So this is a timeline that I put together just so we could best have a visual of what this means when we are talking about the old AFCARS, which is what you guys are currently doing now, which we sometimes call for shorthand AFCARS 1.0 or the 1993 AFCARS. And then we are talking about the new AFCARS, which we call AFCARS 2.1, since the December, we just call it AFCARS 2.1. So the purple numbers, or the purple colors, really are related to the new AFCARS, AFCARS 2.1. And the blue coloring here on this slide is related to the old AFCARS. So you can see May is when the new AFCARS came out, so our timeline at the bottom. We are now collecting for 20B, and you have a submission period for 20B of the current AFCARS, the old AFCARS, on November 14th, 2020. So you'll be, during this time, collecting the old AFCARS, and you're spending time planning, coding, training, which is what you're doing right now for the AFCARS 2.1. And here we get into the sticky part here, where October 1st of 2022 is when you're going to actually start collecting for the new AFCARS. You will still be, this is when you'll stop collecting for the old, but the submission period doesn't start for, doesn't end until November 14th, 2022 for the old AFCARS, and that's the 22B reporting period, submission period. So then your first full submission period will be 23A in the new AFCARS, and you will submit that on May 15th, 2023. And then you can see the next submission periods, 23B, 24A, 24B, and we'll just keep going on from there. So hopefully that'll help give you the visual of what you need when we're thinking about the new AFCARS. So reporting population and the is what this slide is talking about. So this is the out-of-home care reporting population. And so this essentially hasn't changed, but here is what we're talking about. A youth, and there are of any age, who's in foster care under the placement and care responsibility of the agency for more than 24 hours. This is who's in the population. If they're receiving Title IV foster care payments under a Title IV agreement, or a youth who's run away at the time the Title IV agency becomes responsible for the child. That's the out-of-home care reporting population. Once the child enters the reporting population, he or she remains in that population until the agency's responsibility for the child ends, or the child's foster care maintenance payment ends. And then the second population is the adoption and guardianship assistance reporting population. This includes the youth whose adoption or guardianship was finalized during the report period, and adoptive parents or guardians have a Title IV adoption or guardianship assistance agreement. I'm going to go on and talk about the file submission now, just a little bit about it. I also want to encourage you while I'm presenting to go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat box. We have multiple people who are monitoring the chat box, so they can sometimes answer quick questions, or they're going to compile them so that we can look at these later for your technical assistance needs. You are also free to send the email to AFCARS mailbox, afcars@acf.hhs.gov. So for the file submission, there's an overall change here in what is reported. We're no longer just reporting on the current removal episode and placement. You'll report on the current and all prior episodes of removals, and the current and all prior living arrangements for the youth. For youth that had removal episodes before October 1st, 2022, you need to report only 3 elements: the date of removal, the date of exit, and the exit reason. But you'll need to report the full information for all youth who have a new removal after October 1st, 2022, and who are in foster care on October 1st, 2022. So this is a new conceptualization. The file submission will change from a flat ASCII file to an XML file due to this change. Compliance and penalties. The final rule holds the agencies financially accountable for submitting quality data. So the submitted files will be checked for compliance based on standards and quality of the data files. The data file standards will be based on timely submission of the file and proper format of the file. The data quality standards will be based on a threshold error rate for applicable records using missing data, invalid data, internally inconsistent data, and tardy transactions. It will also be free of cross-file errors, ones that exceed the acceptable threshold. We in the Children's Bureau have started the process to develop error specifications for these data quality standards. We will make a determination of compliance for each of the data files for each submission period. We'll exempt records from a compliance determination for the child whose 18th birthday occurred in a prior report period. This applies to both data files. But for the adoption and guardianship assistance data file, the child will be exempt if he or she is in a Title IV guardianship. If the submitted file is determined to be non-compliant, the agency will have 6 months to correct the records and submit a corrected data file. Here, if an agency is still determined to be non-compliant after 6 months, CB will apply the penalties required in the statute. For the A files, which are due on May 15th, CB will assess the penalty based on the agency's claims for the 3rd quarter of the federal fiscal year. For the B files that are due on November 14th, CB will assess the penalty based on the agency's claims for the 1st quarter. The penalty is 1/6 of 1% of the agency's Title IV foster care administrative and training funds. If your submissions continue to be out of compliance, the penalty increases to 1/4 of 1%. CB will offset the agency's Title IV foster care grant award in the amount of the penalty from your agency's claims. So now I'm going to talk about the out-of-home care data file. And many of these elements that we're going to go over, many of them are the same. And so I didn't spend time putting those into this presentation. This presentation is going to be where there are changes, where there were revisions, where elements were removed, or where elements were added from the old AFCARS. So here's a big chunk that was added for the Indian Child Welfare Act data elements. And there are 6 of them here. And these are to be collected by state Title IV agencies only. Tribes are to submit for the AFCARS data also, but not for these ICWA elements. This is for the state Title IV agencies only. So these are 6 that have been added. The reason to know a child is an Indian child, the child's tribal membership in a federally recognized tribe, and then what that, which federally recognized tribes those might be. Whether the ICWA applies is the B5I there, and the date of the application of ICWA, and whether notification was sent to the Indian child's tribe. Another place where we have added abandoned and declined options to the child race and ethnicity, and replaced the option of unable to determine with unknown. So those are smaller changes to the child race and ethnicity, whereas most things stay the same there. Also in the child information, here for the health assessment and child diagnosed conditions, an element was added on whether the child had a health assessment. And then we revised options for whether the child had this health, behavioral, or mental health condition. So you can see the 4 answers there are different than the yes, no that used to be part of this question. The child, now it's child has the condition, the exam was conducted and none of the conditions apply, the exam conducted, but the results haven't been received or there's been no exam. And so here's a revised list of the diagnosed conditions, very similar to the old list. Another group that has been added to AFCARS 2.1 is the ones on schooling and education level and special education. These 3 elements are completely new and are not currently reported. So we're asking whether the child is enrolled in elementary, secondary, post-secondary education or college, or if the child is not school age or not enrolled. The other question is on the level of education. You can see kindergarten to 12th grade, GED, post-secondary education, college, or not school age. And a question about special education, if the child has an individualized education program or an individualized family service program, all added. Here are 3 questions, whether the child's pregnant or parenting. These are completely new and are not currently reported. Wanting to report whether the child is pregnant, whether the child ever bore or fathered a child, and whether the child and his or her child or children are placed together. Now we move on to prior adoption or guardianship. And so here for prior adoption, we revised the element that was child's age at legalization is now the prior adoption finalization date. It used to collect whether the child was adoption was less than 2 years old, 2 to 5 years old, and now it's collecting what was the prior adoption date. We're adding whether there was a prior inter-country adoption and whether the child experienced prior legal guardianship and what date that is or was. In the financial and medical assistance, we revised the list of sources. So you can see those all here. Those are all in the final rule itself. You'll see it in the CSR when that's available after July 13th. All of these are there. As far as the Title 40 foster care, during that report period, we used to ask for the dollar amount of the monthly foster care payment, and that has been removed. Siblings is new, also for AFCARS 2.1. So these are 3 elements: the total number of siblings, the number of siblings in foster care, and the number of siblings who are in the same living arrangement. Now, collecting information on the parent or the guardian information. So the year of birth is the same, except there's the addition of abandoned if the parent is unknown, and then added whether the parent is a member of an Indian tribe. The termination of parental rights is different from the current AFCARS. in certain ways. So we added this termination and modification of parental rights as to whether it's voluntary, involuntary, or not applicable. And then we added the date of determination or modification of parental rights petition. So this is something that's completely new to this part of AFCARS in looking at the petition itself and having that, which it can be left blank if it's not applicable. This is an added data element with the option of deceased for that one also. We removed the current caretaker family structure. Now I'm going to go on to, yes.
Hi, Becky. This is Jennifer. I'm sorry
Jennifer?
I was late joining. There are a couple of, there's some hands raised. Yeah, I'm sorry, little technical difficulties, so my apologies. My apologies. But there are some there are some questions in the chat, some of which we can address now and some later, but there are two people with hands raised. So I thought maybe we could take a minute to see if those with hands raised had questions they wanted to ask, if they relate to things that you just reviewed.
Let us, so Rush and Phil, do you see the hand raised, and
Yes.
are you able to
This
open
is Rush.
Okay.
Yep. If you just want to call on someone in the attendee tab, and then I can allow them to speak up.
Okay, let's go ahead with, Cynthia Richter Jackson. That looked like you had your hand raised first, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, I'm good now. My questions are answered. Thank you.
Okay, good to hear that. All right, we'll move down to the next person, which is Ann Hunt. Ann, would you like to ask a question?
This is Ann. I didn't mean to raise my hand. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay.
Did you see, were there questions that you wanted us to address from the chat?
Well, there were a couple of simple questions that one was just maybe the definition. Somebody asked about what tardy means, tardy submissions. We can maybe circle back to that and answer at the end. I think it has to do with data entry being entered late, I believe is the answer to that. And then there was a question about the data prior to October 1st, 2022, and whether that requires all historical data to be submitted for those 3 required fields. Actually, I don't know if that's something that we can also answer at the end. That is, maybe we should wait for that one.
I think that one will be answered, but Chun-Li, I see that that's what you asked. If you wanted to, if we don't answer it by the end, then you can send it to AFCARS mailbox and we'll make sure to get that in there. But I think that will be answered within here. Any other questions in the chat box or question and answer?
I think we're good for now. We'll continue to monitor those. And as you said earlier, Rebecca, we do have a team of people trying to respond to these as they come in. I think that was
great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. It takes all of us to run these webinars. But we will move on to the removal information right now. So for the child's removal, this is different from the old AFCARS in that your agency will report information on each of the child's removals instead of just the most recent. So this information will be reported for the child's current and all prior removals. So you'll need to report only 3 elements, the date of removal, date of exit, and exit reason, on the prior removals of youth that had removal episodes before October 1st, 2022. But youth who are in foster care and youth who are in your reporting population after that would have be reporting this child's removal information on all of the episodes that are happening to that child, not just the most recent. So a big change here. We removed the element on the date of first removal, and this is because we will be collecting information on all removals. The total number of removals to date has been removed because we will have information on all the removals. The date of latest removals removed, and the manner of removal from home are all elements that have been removed from the new AFCARS. We added the type of environment the child was living at the time of removal for this one. You can see parent, relative, legal guardian, or relative, legal guardian, household, justice facility, medical, mental health facility, or other.
Updated list of family circumstance at removal includes 34 conditions, including runaway, physical abuse, medical neglect, death of caretaker, educational neglect, and 29 others.
And the family circumstances at removal, this exhaustive list, or it's probably not exhaustive, but this long list was added and revised these circumstances. So they're all listed here. You can see some of them are new to what has been collected prior, but you guys may have been collecting this as a state, but just hadn't been reporting it through AFCARS, but these are all ones that we're asking for you to report in the new AFCARS. Sex trafficking is new to collect here, and we're adding 6 new elements, wanting to know if the child was a victim of sex trafficking prior to entering foster care, and then if so, whether that was reported to law enforcement and what date that was, and then if the child was a victim of sex trafficking while in foster care, and whether that was reported to law enforcement and the date. Living arrangements. Here we're revising the terminology, which we used to talk about placements, and we're now talking about living arrangements. So swap that out in your terminology. It's different from the old AFCARS in that the agency will report information on each of the child's living arrangements instead of just the most recent. So just what I talked about in 2 slides back about the removal episodes, all of them, we're also asking for all of the living arrangements. So this information will be reported for the child's current and all prior living arrangements. So under the talking about these living arrangements and the date of the living arrangements, we removed the number of previous placements in this episode because that's unnecessary since we're collecting all. We revised the date of placement to make it the date of the living arrangement, and then we clarified the definition. So the definition is entering the first date of the placement or indicating the date of the voluntary placement agreement or the court order that provided the agency with the placement and care responsibility for the child. So in the case of a child who's run away or who's already in a living arrangement and remains there when the agency receives placement and care responsibility, including the date that the agreement or the court order was, rather than the date the child was originally placed in the living arrangement. And as in the current placement setting was sort of changed out to multiple elements. So here's an element, is it a foster family home? And choosing all that apply here. So it could be a licensed home, therapeutic foster home, shelter care foster home, relative foster family home, pre-adoptive home, kin foster family home. You can see I indicated that 3 of those are brand new that you hadn't seen AFCARS reporting before, but you can choose whichever ones of these apply, and it could be multiple. You could have a licensed therapeutic foster family home, so for an example. Or if it's not a foster family home, then you may choose an other living arrangement, but you may choose only one of all of those listed there. In the location of the living arrangement, we're asking where it is. So rather than being a yes/no question, like it was in old AFCARS, now it is it in state or in tribal service area? Is it out of state or out of tribal service? Is it out of the country or is it run away or whereabouts unknown. And if it is indicated that it was out of service area or out of the country, then to report the jurisdiction or country where the child is living. We revised the foster family structure to be the marital status of the foster parent. So it's married couple, unmarried couple separated, which is new, and single adult rather than a single female or single male. We added the child's relationship to the foster parent, being that it is relative, non-relative, or kin. And I put a definition into kin there because kin wasn't used in the old AFCARS, but where there is a psychological, cultural, or emotional relationship between the child or the child's family and the foster parent without a legal or biological marital connection between the child and the foster parent. We added the foster parent's tribal membership and added the sex of each of the foster parents. Slide 41 brings us to permanency planning. So we revised, no longer using most recent case plan goal, we're reporting the permanency plan. So we updated the response options to include reunify with parent, which was from the last one, live with other relatives, adoption, guardianship, planned permanent living arrangement, and permanency plan not established. So those are the ones that are updated, and the last bullet in there says we removed emancipation and long-term foster care as response options. We added 5 elements under permanency planning: the date of the permanency plan, and then the dates of the periodic reviews and the dates of the permanency hearings, caseworker visit dates, and caseworker visit locations, child's residence or other locations. So this is all new for AFCARS 2.1. Now we move on to exit information. So we added whether the child was transferred to another agency, and these are the listing of the agencies under that. And under exit to adoption and guardianship, we added the adoptive parents or guardians tribal membership. We added the sex of the adoptive parents or guardians. We replaced adoptive parents or guardians family structure with a marital status question. And added the number of siblings in the adoptive or guardianship home. Here also we replaced the monthly subsidy and adoption agreement with the assistant agreement type. So you see the types there, and you would choose which of those apply. The adoption and guardianship assistance data file is very small. Some of the information that in AFCARS 1.0 that was submitted for the adoption file is now mostly incorporated in the out-of-home care data file. So some things are still being collected, but they're submitted in a different file. But one change to this file, it comprises only children with the 4E guardian assistance agreement or adoption agreements, and it includes elements from, I already said that, contains elements from the current adoption data file that have been incorporated into and revised into the out-of-home care file. So those sort of have been removed from this, but you're still collecting the information. It includes an assistant agreement termination date because this is when the child exits the reporting population. And we revised the current child was placed by element to the adoption or guardianship placing agency. You can see those are the Title 4E agency, private agency, Indian tribe under contract agreement would be the response options for that. And I'm now going to turn this over to our colleagues in the Division of State Systems. So Teresa Young can share a little bit about the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System.
Thanks, Becky. If we could go to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay. We just wanted to make sure that folks know that 4E FFP for system changes, whether you are a CWIS or a non-CWIS, are available. You would need to make sure that you describe those changes in an APD, as with any of your system changes. And if you have questions or you're thinking about the best way to make those changes, you should discuss those with your analysts on a regular call. Next slide, please. And
thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome. And I think Phil is going to go ahead and
yeah.
do the poll questions.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Jana. Go ahead to the next slide. We'd like to move now into we'd like to launch a poll. And if we could advance that slide, Becky. So we just want to quickly know from you, which we saw that there were 361 of you on the call today. How helpful was this webinar in providing you with an overview? So we'll give you a few minutes to launch the poll. And now to respond to that poll, was it very helpful, somewhat, neither helpful or non-helpful, somewhat helpful, or very helpful? And we'll let you go ahead and respond to that. And I can see also that we are continuing to respond to questions in the Q&A box as well as in the chat. And so Rush, let me know how we're doing there, and we're getting ready to close this out, I believe.
Yep, we'll give it another second or two. Some people are still voting.
Wonderful.
And for those of you who have questions based on the content of what was shared here, please feel free to ask that in the chat box or the question and answer box. I will go to my colleagues who have been monitoring those and see if there's any additional questions that we are able to ask and answer during this webinar. Otherwise, we're going to take those questions with us as we develop additional technical assistance materials.
Great.
All right, we're done polling, ending poll now, and sharing the results.
Okay. Great. Well, most of you felt that this was at least somewhat helpful or very helpful, and some were kind of neutral, neither helpful nor non-helpful. So we appreciate you responding to that poll. As again, this is the first webinar in the series on the AFCARS final rule. We'll go ahead and close out those results now. And at this point, I think we will go to the resource slide. While we have those resources pulled up, we will again go to questions. And again, if you have questions, you can just go ahead and raise your hand. There's the raise hand function. And then that way we can unmute your line for you and we can try and answer your question right here. We have some time allotted for today's webinar. So if you'd like to ask your question live, you're able to do that. In the meantime, see that we have several open questions. And I'll ask my panelists if there are some questions that you're seeing in the question and answer box that you would like to go ahead and read out loud for everyone, and we can answer it this way. If you'd like to do that, and or in our chat box, while we give folks a chance to think about their question and raise their hand.
So this is Jennifer. Oh,
Thanks,
sorry.
Jennifer.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to point out that there are a number of questions about definitions, and I think that I just want to let folks know that those are the kinds of things that we're going to be offering some very precise advice about, and we do appreciate your asking them. So please keep them coming because they definitely will reveal nuances, perhaps, that we want to make sure that we include in our consideration when we give the technical assistance back. So please continue to ask them, but I'm letting you know now, as I'm sure Becky did at the beginning, that some of the more detailed information about how to produce these AFCARS variables are forthcoming. There is a request that we release the question and answers with the PowerPoint and recording, and we can work with our Gateway folks to see what's the best way of doing that. I can see that that would be helpful.
I don't know that we'll have the answers to all of these questions available when we send out the PowerPoint and the recording, but we do intend to answer these questions as they come in, either through technical bulletins or through additional webinars or through other methods. One of those might be an FAQ document, but it won't be available at the same time as this PowerPoint and recording is sent out.
I see too that there are a number of questions about the structure of the file. Another area that we are developing some very specific guidance on, so that is also forthcoming. This is about both the structure of the format of the variables as well as the structure of the file itself.
Well, this has been really helpful for me to get a look at some of you all's questions, and we all have access to the AFCARS resource mailbox, so when your questions come in, and some of you sent in very detailed questions before the webinar, I appreciate those. Keep sending them in, and hopefully we will be able to provide answers to those in the best way format so that you all can best set up your systems to collect and report this information to us. We do have the next webinar set up for August 31st, most tentative date. So please mark that on your calendar for the second in the series of webinars. And we will also be sending out after this an email that's going to come with a link to a very short evaluation. But again, please try to fill that out just because this is our first in our series of webinars. So any feedback that you give us on this particular webinar will help us in the series that we're going to continue on to help until the implementation begins October 1st of 2022. And I'll also try to send out some handouts related to this in that webinar so that you have some more helpful handouts. And then when this recording is available, I'll let you know where that's housed also. So I don't see any raised hands, and I know more questions are coming in, but I don't think that we have ones that we have definite answers to quite yet. So please continue to send in your questions, and I will take this opportunity to thank you all for being a part of this webinar. Thank you for your questions and your responding to the polls and sharing your feedback with us. We welcome any additional feedback, sending it to the AFCARS mailbox, and I will be back in touch with you in the next few days as a follow-up to this webinar.
Becky, it does look like we have a question, raised hand. Did you want to take that before we close out today?
Oops, we have two. We have three. Now everyone is getting, we can try.
Let's go in the order that they've come in it, if that's okay. So if you did raise your hand using the hand raise function, keep it up, please do that if you have a question. If you might have tapped on that by accident, we don't want to put you on the spot, so you can put your hand down if that was just an accident. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and call on our first person with the question or a comment, and that is Lee Brown. And so we'll unmute your line now.
Hi, yes. There are several questions in the Q&A that haven't been answered, so I just wondered if those were missed or what happened there. My question in particular was about gender reporting, and that lots of us are collecting binary, non-gender specific information. I'm wondering how we're supposed to report that.
I'm looking through, Rebecca, I'm looking through, I don't see that question, so I apologize if that's in there somewhere. But we will be sending out additional clarification and information on reporting sex and what the elements are that are in the AFCARS 2.1 for that. So we will be sharing more information on that when that's available in our additional technical assistance materials.
Okay. Lee, do you have any other questions? You said you might have had more than one. And I would say that as just for me, I'm watching the questions come in, they were coming in really fast. So if we didn't address it right away, we apologize. We're trying to respond as quickly as we can. So thanks for that. And, okay, we'll go to the next person. I see with their hand raised, and that's Stephanie Champagne. Hopefully I said that right. And you should
Stephanie's
be up
still on mute.
now, Stephanie. Can we unmute her for her? Okay.
I think it was an accident.
Okay. All right. We'll come. Maybe we'll try then the next one we see here, which is Jason DeSantis. Jason, are you still with us?
Oh, hi, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. I don't have a question.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Right. This is Hargrove. There was an individual who did ask about, I guess evidently they missed the body in the presentation.
John, it's a little hard to hear you. Can you get closer to the microphone?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Oh, that's that commercial. There was an individual asked about, evidently they missed it in the presentation, about the expected file format for the new AFCARS. Okay. So if you want to mention that to the group, that would be.
Yeah, John, I can't really hear you. So I think you said something about an expected file format. And there was another question. Yes, we're hoping to address questions about the file format and the file submission in our next webinar. And so we don't have much more than what we've shared today available for you all yet. Besides the XML, oh, I see now in there Mark had asked, yes, an XML file is what we're expecting. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Rebecca, I think we're ready to go ahead and wrap up this. What we can do though is we can leave the line open for a few more minutes. If you would like to submit questions through the Q&A box, you can. And then that way we can collect those so that we can incorporate them in our future technical assistance. Again, these resources we'd like to point to you, which is our Children's Bureau AFCARS website, and you see the link there. And also where the Code of Federal Regulations for AFCARS can be found. The information memorandum link is there. And again, as Rebecca had said, and also Jennifer, we continue to ask that you submit questions to us at afcars@acf.hhs.gov. That will definitely help us prepare for the next webinar on August 31st. And please expect an email from AFCARS following this webinar, which will include a follow-up handout as well as a link to an evaluation that we really would encourage you to participate in as we hope to strengthen each of these webinars as we go through the series. And with that, the time for August 31st, we expect that to be at 2 p.m. Eastern. So our next webinar is scheduled right now for August 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern. Please be on the lookout for a save the date and a registration link for that webinar as well. Okay, and if I don't have any other comments from our panelists, we will go ahead and close out today's webinar with, again, a big thank you to everyone who participated as well as to our panelists.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye for now, everyone.